Imagine putting on like an incredibly intricate costume, right?
Yeah.
Stepping out onto a stage and performing this exhausting, complex dance routine.
Oh, man.
And you do this every single day for months on end.
Just nonstop.
Exactly. You hit every mark, you expend all this massive amount of energy, but the curtain never actually goes up. The show just never opens.
That sounds like a nightmare, honestly.
Right. But that bizarre scenario is essentially what is playing out inside a tiny, quiet glass box on the internet today. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Thanks for having me back.
So glad you're here.
Yeah.
Because today we're stepping away from, the algorithms that identify the entire world for us in like 3 seconds flat.
Yeah, the instant gratification stuff.
Exactly. And instead, we're looking at a highly specific, totally analog slice of life from today, April 18, 2026. It is a journal entry by an author named Ang, and it's titled Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 236.
Part 236, that is just wild.
It really is. So our mission today for you listening is to explore this micro-mystery happening inside a single aquarium. We're unpacking what it actually takes to pin down the identity of a tiny aquatic creature.
Which is way harder than it sounds.
Way harder. And we're also exploring the intense patience required when nature absolutely refuses to operate on a human timeline.
Yeah, it's a brief piece of source text, but the implications are massive here.
Oh, totally.
You really have this observational science colliding with a surprisingly philosophical view of unpredictability.
Yeah.
Because, we live in this era where we expect the natural world to just be a searchable database,
Right, like you see a bird, you pull out your phone, an app barcodes it, and you just move on with your day.
Exactly. But Ang's journal entry forces us to look at the severe friction that happens when you cannot just scan a barcode.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the sheer, undeniable dedication implied by that title alone. Part 236.
Yeah, that's not a typo.
No. You do not write 236 distinct documented entries about a hobby unless you have essentially rewired your brain to accept a very, very slow drip of information.
That number is basically a filter. It tells you immediately that Ang is not some casual participant looking for a quick fix.
Right.
Writing 236 entries means you have committed to a long-term relationship with observation. It completely changes the baseline of our whole conversation today.
It really is.
We aren't looking at a quick snapshot, We're looking at a sustained, deliberate study.
And the primary conflict in Ang's post centers entirely around that struggle for observation. Like Ang starts by noting that they have been keeping a specific genus of fish called Apistogramma for, quote, a while now.
Oh, wow.
But it's only today, in entry 236, that Ang finally pinned down the exact species. They confirmed it is the Two-Striped Dwarf Cichlid, or, biologically speaking, Apistogramma bitaeniata.
Which, by the way, moving from the broad genus to the specific species is a massive leap for a hobbyist.
Well, really?
Oh, absolutely. It's the transition from, like, a generalized assumption to actual scientific certainty.
Right.
But the text reveals that the certainty didn't just come from some sudden realization or a lucky guess.
No, not at all.
The catalyst for this breakthrough required a wildly specific set of intersecting physical conditions.
Yeah, Ang needed proof, and the bar for that proof was agonizingly high.
Painfully high.
The text states it took, quote, all these moons to confirm the species. And the reason for that delay is that Ang needed to capture both of the fish at their peak coloration in a single frame.
What's fascinating here is how that phrase, all these moons, is just this beautiful, cyclical measurement of time.
Yeah, it's very poetic.
It is, because it isn't a rigid count of days or weeks, right? It reflects the biological rhythm of the animals themselves. Ang couldn't force this identification.
Right, you can't just poke them and say, hey, change colors.
Exactly. The biological markers required for a positive idea demanded that both specimens display their absolute brightest colors simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
And they had to be positioned together perfectly in the viewfinder.
I am trying to visualize the mechanics of pulling that off, and it just sounds like an absolute nightmare.
Oh, it really does.
It is like trying to get a photograph of two toddlers who live in a jungle, right? Where neither of them is blinking.
Good luck with that.
Right. Both of them are smiling perfectly, the lighting is flawless, and they just happen to be standing shoulder to shoulder.
Spot on analogy.
Because if one fish darts behind a piece of driftwood, the shot is ruined.
Yep.
If the ambient lighting in the tank makes one look a little dull, the identification is compromised. You are dealing with two unpredictable living creatures that have zero interest in posing for your taxonomic mugshot.
Right, and that completely subverts our modern relationship with data gathering.
How so?
Well, in most areas of your life, if you want information, you actively retrieve it. You search, you query, you demand it.
Oh, right. Like Googling something.
Exactly. But in Aang's aquarium, active retrieval is just impossible. You cannot prompt a fish to achieve peak coloration.
Because it's not a switch they just flip, right?
No, not at all. Coloration in these animals is tied to mood, dominance, environmental comfort, and, crucially, readiness to mate.
Wow.
It's a completely internal biological state. So Aang basically had to surrender the role of an active investigator and adopt the role of a passive, enduring witness.
Just waiting it out.
Yeah, you simply sit by the glass for
Yeah.
all these moons until the natural variables just randomly align in your favor.
That brings a completely different weight to the photograph Aang finally managed to take.
It really does.
Like, when the variables did align, Aang actually got the shot. So let's look at the visual evidence itself. Aang breaks down the visual clues very methodically in the journal.
Very precise.
The first and most prominent feature, which actually gives the fish its common name, is the presence of a double horizontal line visible along the sides of their bodies.
Right, that double stripe.
Right.
That acts as the foundational baseline for the identification. It is the static biological signature of the Two-Striped Dwarf Cichlid. But Aang uses the photograph to highlight something far more dynamic happening above and below those stripes.
Oh, the physical differences.
Exactly. The text pivots to describe the clear sexual dimorphism that was captured in the single frame.
Okay, let's translate that for anyone who might not spend their weekends reading biology journals.
Fair enough.
Think of sexual dimorphism like two entirely different uniforms being issued to the exact same sports team.
I like that.
Right. Evolution hands the males and the females of the same species drastically different physical traits based entirely on their biological roles.
Precisely. It is a divergence in physical form.
Oh.
And in Aang's photograph, that divergence is incredibly stark.
Yeah, it sounds like night and day.
It really is. Yeah. Aang details the exact positioning to prove it. So the male is positioned below in the photo, and this male is sporting a distinctive blue iridescent sheen, along with these elongated, really pointed fins.
And meanwhile, the female is positioned just above him, and her uniform could not be more different.
Not at all.
She is showing off heavy yellow tones, and her overall body shape is smaller and just much more rounded.
So you have this sharp metallic blue geometry on the bottom, contrasting directly with a soft, rounded yellow geometry on the top.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I am stuck on the evolutionary math of this visual contrast.
Okay, lay it on me.
If these two fish are the exact same species, living in the exact same environment, facing the exact same predators, why on earth would evolution select for such wildly different physical traits?
It's a great question.
I mean, a flashy, iridescent blue sheen and long, flowing fins seem like the equivalent of wearing a neon sign that says, "Eat me," to any larger fish in the vicinity.
Basically, yes.
Why wouldn't both sexes just adopt the female's yellow, rounded, presumably more camouflaged appearance?
Well, that is the core paradox of sexual dimorphism. It's a brilliant question. You are looking at the tension between two very different evolutionary pressures.
Which are
Natural selection and sexual selection. Natural selection is all about sheer survival, blending in, escaping predators, just living another day.
right, the camouflage.
Exactly. If survival were the only goal, you are absolutely right. Both fish would look like gravel.
Yeah.
But sexual selection is a whole different game. That's about securing a mate and passing on your genetics.
So the male is essentially taking a massive biological gamble here.
Oh, a huge one. He is basically carrying a biological billboard. The blue iridescence and the elongated pointed fins are energetically very expensive to maintain.
And they absolutely make him more visible to predators, right?
100%. But those traits are signals to the female. They advertise his genetic fitness.
Wow.
He is essentially saying, look at how healthy I am. I can afford to be this bright and carry these large fins, and I still haven't been eaten.
That is such a flex.
It really is. The female, on the other hand, is optimizing for a totally different biological role. Her rounded shape is better suited for carrying eggs, and her yellow tones likely help her blend into the substrate, or, the leaf litter, where those eggs would actually be hidden.
So the physical traits are not just random paint jobs. They are highly specialized tools for their specific roles.
Exactly. And those tools only shine at their brightest under certain conditions.
The peak coloration.
Right. The peak coloration that Aang waited all those moons to capture isn't a permanent state. It is a dynamic, shifting indicator. When those colors reach that maximum intensity, the fish are communicating something vital.
They are broadcasting their readiness to reproduce.
Yep.
Because the text makes it clear that these vibrant colors are not just for aesthetic display. Aang notes that these physical clues are heavily paired with behavioral clues, too.
Right. They aren't just hovering there looking pretty.
No. They are actively performing, quote, ritual mating dances.
And the word ritual is key here. A ritual isn't just a random twitch.
No, it implies structure.
Exactly. It is a highly choreographed, sequential series of movements that have been hardwired into their biology over literally millions of years. And it requires a significant caloric investment to perform these dances.
And Aang points out they have been performing these draining, elaborate routines for, quote, quite some moons now.
There's that measurement of time again.
Yeah.
This isn't a fleeting interaction over a weekend. This is a sustained, marathon behavioral display. The biological engine is running absolutely red hot.
So what does this all mean?
Well,
Because this is where the logic of the entire situation seems to just break down for me.
okay, how so?
We have the peak colors dialed up to a 10, right? We have the complex ritual mating dances happening for moons on end. The male is risking predation with his blue sheen. The female is primed in her yellow tones.
Right.
But then Aang reveals a massive glaring void at the center of all this activity. Aang writes, I haven't found any eggs.
Yeah, you have all the input variables perfectly aligned, the biological programming is executing flawlessly, but the final output just refuses to materialize.
It seems like an astonishing waste of precious energy.
It does.
Because in nature, calories are currency. You do not spend your currency on a marathon dance routine unless there is a guaranteed return on investment.
Right.
It feels like a software program trapped in an infinite loop. The code for put on the uniform has run. The code for perform the dance is running on repeat. But the final line of code that says lay the eggs is just endlessly stalling out.
The infinite loop metaphor is perfectly apt here.
Right.
The fish are trapped in a behavioral holding pattern. Their instincts are driving them to prepare for a biological event that simply isn't happening.
Which has to be maddening to watch.
Oh, completely. For an observer, especially a dedicated hobbyist who has meticulously created the environment for these animals, that kind of disconnect can be intensely frustrating.
Oh, I bet.
You have provided the tank, the water, the food, and you are watching the culmination of their biological imperative just fail to produce a result.
I would be losing my mind staring at that tank. I would be testing the water chemistry every 5 minutes, convinced I'd done something horribly wrong.
Yeah, most of us would. But Aang's reaction to this missing payoff is shockingly composed.
The reaction is almost stoic. Aang simply writes, it's a bit of a mystery why they're taking their time,
Yeah.
but that's the hobby for you.
That's the hobby for you.
It is such a profound surrender of control.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Aang's mindset offers a really compelling contrast to how you and I typically operate.
In everyday life, you mean?
Yeah. Think about your own life, your career, or your personal goals. How often do you put in the work, set up all the perfect conditions, perform all the right dances, and then feel incredibly anxious or defeated when the payoff doesn't arrive on your exact timeline?
Oh, all the time.
We are conditioned to expect that effort equals immediate outcome. A leads directly to B.
We want the vending machine experience. You put the clone in, you press the button, you get the snack.
Exactly. But biology is not a vending machine.
Clearly not.
Aang has spent all these moons waiting for the photograph, decoding the complex sexual dimorphism, and watching the energetic mating rituals, only to be met with a totally open-ended mystery.
Just a giant question mark.
Right. And Aang's acceptance of that mystery highlights a deep lesson in observation. As humans, we can categorize the species, we can map the physical traits, we can document the rituals, but we do not hold the reins.
No.
Nature operates entirely on its own indifferent schedule.
The ultimate conclusion of Aang's journal entry leans completely into that acceptance, too. Like Aang finishes the post by saying, nevertheless, we'll just have to wait and see.
Wait and see. It is the only truly scientifically accurate response to a system you cannot control.
Why?
You cannot force the biological loop to close. You cannot rush the appearance of the eggs any more than you could force those two distinct little fish to swim into the exact same frame for the camera. The hobbyist has to make peace with the fact that they are not the director of this play. They are merely an audience member sitting in the dark watching the stage.
It is a remarkable journey to extract from just a few lines of a journal entry, honestly.
It really is packed with insight.
We started with the sheer, stubborn friction of analog observation, the months spent trying to capture a single, perfect photograph of the Apistogramma bitaeniata.
A photograph that finally unlocked their identity by showcasing that baseline double horizontal stripe.
Followed by that deep dive into the evolutionary wager of sexual dimorphism. Seeing how the male's striking blue iridescence and pointed fins act as a high-risk advertisement, while the female's rounded yellow form prioritizes function and camouflage.
Two entirely different uniforms, worn by the exact same team coming together in one frame.
Which brought us to the ultimate paradox of the tank. The uniforms were at peak color, the intricate mating dances were being performed day after day, but the energy was being expended with zero biological payoff. No eggs.
Just an ongoing, mysterious loop of preparation.
When you step back and look at your own daily life, filled with immediate notifications and on-demand answers, a journal entry like Eng's Part 236 feels almost radical.
It does.
It forces you to recognize that there is an immense, quiet value in simply enduring the observation.
Absolutely.
Sometimes the goal isn't to force the answer to appear, right? It is to build the patience required to watch the mystery unfold at its own speed.
It completely reframes the concept of waiting. It turns waiting from a passive frustration into an active state of engagement.
I love that.
And this raises an important question based purely on the text Eng provided.
Okay.
We know these two-striped dwarf cichlids are perfectly biologically prime. Their colors are maximized, their movements are synchronized, they are locked into this ritual for moons.
Right, they are fully committed to the bit.
Exactly. So the question is, are these fish somehow biologically aware that the cycle is failing, that the eggs are missing? Or is the exhausting, endless ritual dance itself fulfilling a need, satisfying a piece of their programming that we, as observers staring through the glass, just cannot comprehend yet?
That completely flips the perspective. Like, are they failing to finish the routine, or is the routine itself the entire point for now?
Exactly.
That is a brilliant thought to chew on. The digital world might give you the name of a plant in 3 seconds, but it absolutely cannot decode the silent logic of an infinite biological dance.
Not a chance.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the quiet mysteries of Eng's aquarium. And to you listening, take some time to observe the slow-moving mysteries in your own life today. We will catch you on the next one.